Alright folks, it's your boy NaptownBorn. Before I get into predictions today, I wanted to do a video about one of my favorite fighters, Winky Wright. Just announced his retirement after the Quillin fight, and probably rightfully so, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. This is as much a reply to Julian Williams from the distance as it is anything. Let's talk about Winky Wright, okay? And I'm a guy who respects Winky Wright a lot more than I respect Sugar Shane Mosley, and it's not because Wright beat Mosley, it's because of the road that Winky was forced to take. You're talking about an American fighter who couldn't get promoted here because casual fans thought he was boring and didn't want to watch him, and even, back then Winky wasn't as defensive as you think he is. Prime Winky, as defensive as that. He was a mover, really, but tended to come out well in exchanges. So he ended up being a mover who, when he chose to exchange, would win exchanges. Go watch his previous fights, man. He had 25 fights and 25 victories until he met Vasquez. Now, Vasquez was no punk, okay, and neither was Winky. But at that time, Winky had not evolved into the prime Winky that you know. Winky was still inexperienced when he met Vasquez. He's one of those examples of why you don't just immediately stop following a fighter when they lose. For why you should stick with the fighter you like, even if he loses, depending on how he loses. Winky lost that fight. He always claimed that 3 of the 5 knockdowns were slips. I see maybe 1 slip out of the 5 knockdowns. He still got knocked down cleanly 4 times in that fight. I did have Vasquez winning that fight, as anybody who watched it should have. But I gave Winky 6 rounds of a 12-round fight. Now, yes, he lost, because he lost 6 rounds, plus he got knocked down 5 times. But watch Winky, except minus the 9th round where he got knocked down twice. He tried really to survive that round, in all honesty. He could have got KO'd against Vasquez. Another referee might have stopped that fight in the 9th. Might have. I was happy that it went. And I didn't watch it live. This is something I've gone back and watched. But as a Winky Wright fan, I want you to see his first loss. That was an amazing fight. Because when Winky got knocked down, he got back up. Okay, yeah, that's not a big deal. But when he got back up, he fought like he could still win that round. You see what I'm saying? He got knocked down, but he fought like he could still win that round. He was vicious in this fight. He was hanging in the pocket, really banging with a banger like Vasquez. And Vasquez was not a highly touted fighter, or as highly, but that was a tough fighter. Winky lost the fight, but God damn it, this is when you see how tough Winky Wright really is. When he loses to Vasquez, Winky's a beast. You know what I mean? And from that point on, he really finds it difficult to find a fight. Like I said, the American promotions company wouldn't promote Winky. So he ends up going over to France. They put him in there against, I don't remember the guy's name, Lattimore. And, he beats him and then goes on to lose to Vasquez. And after that, he's an American fighter under a French promotional company. So he's fighting in Monte Carlo. He's fighting in France, Germany, the UK, South Africa. I mean, Winky Wright, to me, is a real road warrior. Glenn Johnson gets a lot of respect around here. And Winky doesn't. He deserves that respect. Because there was like a whole span of so many fights where he only fought in the U.S. once. Everything else was overseas. I haven't been able to watch the Harry Simon fight. I didn't catch it live, and I can't fucking find it on YouTube. I'd like to see that fight because Winky, some decisions didn't go his way, namely Fernando Vargas. Winky beat him, but Vargas got the nod. But again, you're talking about Fernando Vargas, and you're talking about Winky, a guy who doesn't hit, very hard. Or he doesn't have a high KO ratio. I think Winky had the power to stop people in their tracks, but not to put them down. He had pop in his punch, especially his fucking right jab. Straight, left, cross, and his right hook were amazing punches to me. Anyway, he goes toe to toe with Fernando Vargas, through a lot of their fight. He is standing in front of Vargas, fighting Vargas on what should have been Vargas's terms, and beating him to the punch, and not getting hurt. Alright, so he doesn't get the nod in the Vargas fight, though really he should have. That was an amazing, that was another good fight. When you hear people say that Winky Wright was a boring fighter, I question whether or not they've actually sat down to watch some of these Winky fights, because they can be very, very entertaining. The way he could stand in front of people and give just enough head movement and have his hands up here just enough, picking off punches as they come in, and then returning fire. I don't know, man. He's a pretty exciting guy to me. I've liked Winky since the first time I saw him, and the first time I saw him like Julian Williams, the first time I saw him was the Frazier fight. Since then, I've had to retroactively go back and watch these other fights. These other fights were good fights. Let's take a walk down Winky Lane, as it were. So he loses to Vargas, and he ends up getting the belt back from this guy named Bronco McCart. Now, Bronco McCart he'd already had one fight with Bronco McCart and pretty much dominating. Well, McCart's holding the light middleweight title, and so he goes and beats him again to get that title back. Trinidad jumps up from 154 to 160 and vacates the title. So this is when we really first see Winky against Robert Frazier, or late 2001. Okay, so he beats Frazier, and then he goes on to stop this other guy who's really not that good in the 5th round to defend his title. Then McCart is up again for another fucking fight, and Winky goes in there, and McCart just continuously low blows, and ends up getting disqualified for the low blows. After that, Oscar De La Hoya offered to fight him. It was a 50-50 fight. Wright could have won that fight. At the end of the day, De La Hoya wasn't going to take a 50-50 fight. Wright really wasn't going to take anything less than 50-50, and so that fight didn't get made, and it should have. I have a lot of opinions about boxing, and one of my opinions is to keep money out of it. But personally, I think every fight should be a 50-50 split. If it's not worth a 50-50 split, then it tells me as a boxing fan it's not really worth the fight, because it's just about the money. What you should split, if you bring a bigger following, is the pay-per-view and ticket sales and stuff like that. The purse itself should always be 50-50, in my opinion. Moving on. Alright, moving on. Okay, then he goes on to fight Angel Hernandez, and blows Hernandez out of the water. I mean, Winky dominates this fight. After that, Mosley pretty much calls Wright out to take a fight after that, and Wright gladly accepts. Hell yes, he's going to fight Sugar Shane Mosley. Are you fucking kidding me? Going into that fight, Mosley was supposed to go in there and knock Winky out. That's what Mosley was supposed to do. But that ain't what happened. Winky, especially in that first fight, Winky took Sugar Shane Mosley to boxing school, and he put on a fucking clinic and got a decision over Mosley in their first fight. Mosley, of course, wants a rematch after that, and ends up going in there and putting up a better fight against Winky, but Winky was doing a lot of showing out. Winky actually drops his hands in one of the rounds and lets Shane hit him 3 times just to say, you're Sugar Shane Mosley and you can't hurt me. It's a statement, and it was entertaining to watch, but he gives away rounds doing stupid shit like that and makes this fight closer. Wright still wins. So Wright is like the first guy in 29 years to successfully unify the light middleweight, the 154-pound titles. First guy in 29 years after he first beat Mosley, because Mosley was holding titles, or they were fighting for a vacant title or some shit like that. Okay, then he moves on from Mosley to fight Trinidad. Now again, here he comes in, and Trinidad is, a middleweight now, and he's supposed to just knock Wright out. People don't think Wright can win this fight. And again, he goes in there and schools Trinidad. Again, he goes in there and shuts all the critics' mouths and shows everybody that he is an elite fighter in this era. And he makes it look easy to beat Trinidad. He's chasing big fights now. He really just wants to fight the best and nothing but the best. And he ends up getting Jermaine Taylor. Now, this is after Jermaine Taylor beats Hopkins twice, beats some other bullshit fighters, beats Corey Spinks, and then he goes on to fight Wright. Now, again, here we go again. Like, Wright never, ever got respect. Ever. Never got respect. He's supposed to lose this fight. Taylor's supposed to beat Wright, because Taylor beat Hopkins twice. Taylor's supposed to go in here and beat Wright. It doesn't happen. Again, they get a draw, and to me, I consider it a robbery because I had that fight 8 rounds to 4, Winky Wright. Some of them were close, but Wright would put Taylor on the fucking ropes and just start pummeling him. Winky Wright won that fight. He got a draw. It smelled a hometown. Now, I know he fought out of Florida, fought out of Fort Lauderdale. The South is not Winky Wright's home. I mean, this guy was a guy with no home, really. I mean, yeah, he had a couple hometown fights. At that time, you got Taylor in the South coming up. He beat Hopkins twice, They give it a draw. That's a gift for Taylor at that time because he's undefeated. And he gets a draw against Winky when he should have got a loss. So Winky gets the bad end of another decision, but the rematch doesn't happen, even though it should. The rematch doesn't happen because Winky, again, says he deserves half the money. To me, he deserved half the money. So that fight doesn't happen. Taylor doesn't want to give Winky Wright 50% of the money, and I think Taylor doesn't want to fight Winky Wright again. I really honestly think that because it's not too long after this that he gets knocked out by Kelly Pavlik, then beat by Kelly Pavlik. Goes up to 168, fights Carl Froch before the Super 6, gets knocked out by Froch, goes into Super 6, gets knocked out by Abraham. Wright really put him on a bad track. So Wright goes on to fight Ike Corte, and beats Corte easy and actually drops Corte early. Moves on from that fight to go up to Hopkins. Now, this is where it gets bad for Wright because you don't follow Hopkins to a higher weight and fighting. You don't do it. It's not going to work, especially for a career 154-pounder. He should not ever have tried to go up to 170 to fight Hopkins. Maybe if they had fought when Hopkins is at 160, but we'll never really know. Hopkins won that fight pretty clear. I had 8 rounds to 4 for Hopkins, but there was a headbutt in the second round. It cut Winky's eye open, and, that was right above his eye. It had to be dripping in his eye the whole fight, but, no real excuse because Hopkins was just the better fighter that night. I do think it was, a dirty, boring fight, and I think this is where people get this idea that Winky's a boring fighter because if you'd have watched, a year or two earlier when he fought Taylor, that was an awesome fight to me. I thought there was a lot of action in that fight, and I thought it was, a good crowd-pleasing fight. But Wright versus Hopkins was a stinker, man. That was a really boring, really tactical match where neither guy really hit much clean, but Hopkins obviously, won the fight. I don't think it would have went any different at 170 even if he hadn't got cut. But, hey, Wright was never really dominated. Even when he fought Hopkins, Hopkins didn't dominate him. Even when Vasquez, even though he knocked him down 5 times, did not dominate Wright. Vargas, could not impose his will on Wright. He's just one of those guys that in boxing, we need more guys like Winky Wright, more guys like Glenn Johnson who are willing to go anywhere, fight anybody, anytime. So this is the downfall of Wright. He goes into a huge fucking layoff, doesn't fight anybody for a long fucking time, then comes back and gets dominated by Williams. The first time he's ever dominated. It's after an almost 2-year layoff, and Paul Williams comes out and dominates him. Wright's following him around the whole time and just getting punched at long range. continuously. And then after that, he goes into another huge layoff. Is supposed to come back and fight Macklin, but hurts his hand, or can't get a fight with Martinez. And he's been almost like fucking 3 years, over 3 years he's been out of the ring, and then fights Quillin, and that's it. That's the end of Winky. But barring the last 3 fights of his career, I mean, he had a pretty illustrious career. And he was on the bad end of some decisions, but Wright always came to fight. He fought you from round 1 to round 12, and he was never out of any fight until Paul Williams. Never out of any fight, even in the 12th round. He probably still wasn't out of the Hopkins fight in the 12th round if he just would have, pushed himself in that. Well, it doesn't matter. He was never dominated up until the very, really end of his career with Williams, and then, Quillin didn't even really dominate him. Not really. So, this is Naptown. I gotta answer my phone. Deuces. Winky, throughout his career, was a title chaser. A career junior middleweight, really. 154 was his class. Nobody ever really took it from him. There's a lot to be said for that. He wasn't a pound-for-pound guy, but that's okay.